Well, hello everyone. This is Christian, Cardigans and Cards. I am coming to you today to show you how I made an amazing card for my nephew that features the underwater buddies. This set was part of a limited edition kit in which we also got a pineapple, so I'll be using the pineapple die as well. You'll see that I did do a little pre-stamping. Whenever I'm working on a card, I like to have a couple extra images. If I'm going to be coloring, I might as well color it twice and be able to have those extra pieces available. I also did die cutting off screen just to expedite the card making process and so the video wasn't too long. With the kit, we also received the ocean scene stencil, where we'll be able to have some flowers in the background of our underwater scene. What we're going to start off with first is just doing our coloring of the different images from the stamp set. This was done with Olo markers. I am going to pause in talking with you and just put on some tunes so you can see the process on how I colored these images. You'll also see that I did cut out the second of the coloring just so that we had less time of watching me color repetitively. I have also sped up the video, so if you do wish to watch this in slower motion, go ahead and put me on mute and put the music on mute. Otherwise, it's going to sound really funny, but you can slow down that playback speed on YouTube, so go ahead and do that if you'd like. I will meet you back here at the minute marker 8:36. So off screen, I cut out all of my characters and just put them in a little container. And it was now time to start working on the pineapple. Because the die cuts out the holes for the floral portion or the dark portion of the pineapple seed, I'm not quite sure what that section's called. I wanted to make sure that I had a backing behind that so I would not have the sea background showing through my pineapple. So to do that, I just traced it out on a piece of paper and cut it out with a pair of scissors. This will act as a backer piece so my house is no longer see-through and I will be able to have a deepened coloring behind those areas to give it some more depth. To add color to my pineapple, I did simple ink blending, typically involving two tones, a dark tone and a light tone. The light tone was applied to the entire leaf or to the pineapple piece, where the light tone was left towards the base or the center, depending on where I needed that highlight to occur. As I worked through the ink blending, I did make sure to clean up as I went along so that I wouldn't drag those colors into each other. I didn't want to create mud. I wanted to have distinct color tones among all of the different images. For the top of the pineapple, I kept a golden tone towards the middle and then brought in a deeper brown around the edges. With the same deep brown, I did color in the back of my pineapple. I will test it to see if I like it. At this point, I wasn't quite sure, so I set it aside to dry a little bit because I was really questioning, does that look right? So instead, I added some more detail into my pineapple while that dye ink had a few moments to absorb into the paper and distribute a little bit further. And then I'll realign it and try to decide, is that dark enough? Did I really get what I wanted? I decided no, it was not dark enough, so I needed to bring in some deeper tone into it. To do that, I just threw on some gray ink to really darken it just a little bit, and then I was actually happy with my pineapple. These pieces were set aside again, and I cleaned up my work surface once more. Next, I wanted to color in my windows for the pineapple house. Just threw a little blue ink on there just to give it that illusion. Did it only on one side so that it had a built-in reflective piece on it. Finally, it was time to color in my portals. I know that these were not all going to be used. Only one of them was going to be on top and the other two were going to be layered. I did add color to all of those so that when I had these pieces glued and stacked upon each other, they did not have that funny little ledge on it. I wanted to make sure it all blended into place. I repeated this process on the trim of the door. I did plan on gluing these two pieces together and then have the door be separate underneath it to give it that same dimension. To achieve that, I just cut off that door hinge when I die cut those pieces out so that they would be separate. I also wanted to have a little bit of a blue color to my door and to the portals and the trim. To achieve that, I just did a once over with a light blue ink to give it that dimension that I was looking for and that two-tone coloring. The nice thing about using the dye inks is that they are transparent and you can build upon each other. And you can see that really well on the door itself. After I had all the items colored, I did a little cleanup and then pulled out a silicone mat that I tend to do all my gluing on. I know I do have a glass top and you can get the glue off of the glass top really easily, well, supposedly easily with just a little scrubbing or some alcohol or letting water saturate on it and sit there for a little bit. But I just find it easier to put a mat down because I don't have time for that. So the silicone mat works really well because once the glue dries on there, you just peel it off. Because this mat is ultra thin, I was able to also then use my magnets to hold the items together. And this is a blessing because it makes you so you can continue working on doing other things. But I want you to learn from my mistakes. This is my public service announcement to you that you should also make sure that if you are using your magnets to hold down items while they dry, just every once in a while, make sure you wash off your magnets because all of a sudden, one of your portals are gone and you cannot find that little hole anywhere. And you think, okay, did the dog get it? But no, here it was stuck on the bottom of the magnet. Don't be me, clean your magnets. I pulled in a piece of hammermill cardstock, nice and smooth because I was going to be doing some ink blending. I wanted to get a lay of the land to get an idea of where my horizon line, if you want to say that, under the sea is going to be. And I wanted to make sure that my pineapple had enough room and it didn't fall off the edges. I wanted to make sure I had a nice lush green top to my pineapple on the card itself. I masked off an area that was my horizon line. I didn't want my sand to have the blue inside of it, so I'm just taping that down to my board. Taking in two different blues, I start to build my horizon line, with the lighter tones being up towards the top and then having my deeper tone on the bottom towards the back. This gave the illusion of the distance and the deeper waters. You will also notice that my blending is not smooth. It is not smooth on purpose. I wanted to give the illusion that when the light was shining down from above through the water, you had that tonal shifts that you see inside the water itself. So there's lighter spots and darker spots, kind of shimmery. The masks were then removed and reapplied to give me my foreground, the sand that was going to be underneath my characters and closer to me in the scene. You will also see here that this is so sporadic in how the ink blending is done. I wanted to create that texture. I think I may even do some pouncing in between there because I wanted to give even more of an illusion of grains of sand. Later on, I'll be adding even more texture to this sand underneath my characters once I have them assembled. The first layer of the background was completed. It was now time to pull out my stencil. Because I'm a little crazy with my ink blending, I do mask off the areas of the stencil that I will not be using. I also mask off the areas on the card because when I'm coming in with that ink, I don't want that to get smushy or go outside the lines. I want it to only have the color in the area that I want seen. I also have changed my ink choice. Instead of using a dye-based ink, I am now transitioning to the Distress Oxide inks. I am doing this because of the pigment properties with inside of this ink. They will stay opaque on top of the color underneath it. In between my applications of color, I always clean my stencil. I do this because I like to smudge things, or I get ink underneath the stencil itself on accident, and then that will go through onto the card. And I truly just want those flowers to be in certain areas. As I'm determining where to put the flowers, I want to make sure that when I am placing them, I'm not placing them where something's going to be covering them up. Why waste my ink? But I also want to ensure that they are going off of the paper. This will help give the illusion that this scene is continuous, that it goes on and on. As I was working on the background, I started thinking about how my pineapple needed to be a birthday party pineapple. So when I started to work on my sentiment, I also pulled out a stamp set from Pink and Maine called Icing on the Cake. The string of flags was perfect for a decoration and it fit just across the house the right way. Since I was stamping, I pulled out my sentiment as well. I do love when stamp companies provide you layering stamps. so that you don't have to sit there and try to color in those little small areas. I had a little flag that I could just color up, stamp it out, and have it colored and ready to go. Off screen, I did cut out my little die cut with my flags and my sentiment strip. This video is getting a little long, so I thought we better get to the point. To assemble the card, I first laid out my pineapple. I needed to know exactly how many leaves I wanted and how I was going to work with that. To pick up all those leaves, I just used a low tack tape to kind of get them together and started sticking some glue underneath it so that I didn't have to do one piece at a time and smush it in there. Just trying to expedite my workflow a little bit faster. While my glue was drying on the leaves, I continued to do my assembly of the pineapple. I love reverse tweezers. They are perfect for being able to apply glue to something and have an extra set of hands. I have all different types, all different brands. They come in handy. Again, public service announcement, make sure you wash them every once in a while because they do get a little gummy from all that glue that they're holding down. On the back of my flags, I did use very thin foam squares to give some illusion. Because those windows have that ledge on them, I wanted to make sure that the flags were in the foreground and they were in front of the flag so that it looked in proportion and in that it was wrapping around something that was round or cylinder. I will also be using foam behind some of my characters to give them that illusion that they are in front of someone else. Because a lot of times the foam that I'm going to be using on the back of my little characters here is custom to them, I do use a piece of release paper from either a double-sided adhesive, leftovers from a foam backing, just something that's going to have that non-stick feel to it so that I can then cut it on there and not gum up my scissors. So I will cut those special shapes or sizes based on the need and be able to cut it freely without having to work upon myself and fight with myself and the scissors. Once I was satisfied with my layout, I added a little bit of foam tape behind the sentiment and stuck that bad boy up in the big open spot that I left for it. This card panel was then adhered to a 5.5 by 7 card base. I went in and added some white highlights to give some shiny and a little spunk to the eyes to give that reflectivity that we like to see that makes our images come to life. And now my card was complete. It is perfect, I think, for my nephew, and I know he will love it. Thanks for going to this party with me. I know we're all ready to celebrate. I cracked myself up. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today as I took you on this adventure to play with a stamp set that has been screaming to me for a long time. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, my friends.